Hey, what's going on, everybody? In lieu of all the bad and negative stuff going on right now, Penn State surrounding Jerry Sandusky's child molestations, I want to talk about something good and positive and something that you probably didn't even know about. Penn State was trailblazers in a lot of things. Here's a little Penn State history. Check it out. It's a saying that goes, learn something new every day. Well, here's one for you. Hey, did you know that Wallace Triplett was the first African American to be drafted and play in the NFL? And he graduated from Penn State. Wally Triplett. Wally Triplett has been called the Jackie Robinson of Penn State football, a pioneer in the civil rights struggle. Before Lenny Moore, Lydell Mitchell, Kurt Warner, and Curtis Ennis, before any of the dozens of African Americans who have played football at State College, there was Wally Triplett. Triplett was the first African American ever to start and the first to earn a varsity letter on a Penn State football team. Wallace Wally Triplett was the first black player to be drafted and play for an NFL team. The University of Miami offered him a scholarship, assuming he was white. But then segregated university rescinded the offer when they found out that he was black. Triplett instead went on to play at Penn State. Triplett. There he is, number 12. Wallace Triplett. And along with Denny Hogard, that's him and Denny Hogard. They both were Penn State running backs. That's Denny Hogard. Wallace Triplett, that's him now, was the first black American to play in NFL. He played for the Detroit Lions. He was, although Triplett was only the third African American chosen in the 1949 NFL draft, he was the first of the draftees to take the field in a league game. And he, 5'10", 173-pound running back and return specialist, played for the Detroit Lions from 1949 to 1950. Triplett still holds a Lions single-game record in a kickoff return yardage of 294. Second highest total in NFL history, including a 97-yard touchdown return against the Los Angeles Rams in 1950. Going back to Penn State, along with Denny Hogard, Triplett was one of the first African Americans to take the field in a varsity football game for Penn State. During the 1946 season, Penn State's Nittany Lions team voted to cancel a regular season game at the University of Miami rather than compromise by not bringing their black players. So we're talking about a little racism back then. Miami, like other southern schools at the time, refused to compete against integrated schools unless they left their black players at home. In 1948, Triplett became the first African American to play in the Cotton Bowl Classic, catching the tying touchdown in Penn State's 13-13 tie with Southern Methodist University. It has been suggested Penn State's now famous "We Are Penn State" stadium cheer has its origins in SMU's request for a meeting to protest the participation of Penn State's two black players, Triplett and Holgard. Team captain Steve Suhey was said to have responded, "We are Penn State. There will be no meetings." Ha! And that's Steve Suhey. He played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. From 1948 to 1949. And it says grandson currently is a running back at Penn State University right now. And that's Steve Suhey's grandson, Joey Suhey. He's a running back. He's currently a running back for Penn State. That's cool. Steve Suhey's son is Matt Suhey, who won a Super Bowl with the 1985 Chicago Bears as a fullback blocking for Walter Payton. That's Steve Suhey's son. Matt Suhey is Joey Suhey's dad. All out, he's out of Belfont, PA. The whole family was him, his dad, his grandfather, his son. They make up like 90 years of tradition, football tradition at Penn State. That's awesome. His great grandfather played for Penn State. Wow. For the Detroit Lions from 1949 to 1950 and holds the team's single game record in kickoff return yardage with 294 against the Los Angeles Rams in 1950. Following that season, Triplett was drafted into military service for the Korean War. When he returned, the Lions traded him to the Cardinals, and he retired from professional football in 1953 for being the first African American to be drafted by and play for an NFL team. Triplett's picture hangs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio in 2003. The Detroit Lions named him an alumni honorary captain for one of their games. Triplett attended Penn State at a time when many of society's institutions were segregated because of Triplett's courage and the support and commitment of his teammates, coaches, and university administrators. Penn State demonstrated to the nation that separate but equal policies need not be tolerated. Years before the Brown v. Board of Education, Penn State's actions forced other institutions to examine their policies and contributed to the national dialogue about civil rights. Triplett was honored during several ceremonies at Penn State in June 2007. Penn State was able to stand up to injustice and demonstrate to the nation that civil rights mattered and segregation would not be tolerated. One more thing about Wallace Triplett. Following the 1950 season, Triplett became the first NFL player drafted into military service for the Korean War. All right, I want to clear this up. It was other black players that played pro ball before Wallace Triplett, but the NFL was established in 1920, and there were 9 blacks playing in the league at that time: Frederick Douglass, Fritz Pollard, and Robert Wells. Fritz Pollard was the first. Frederick Douglass, better known as Fritz Pollard. Fritz Pollard was the first African American football player. When this story was published in February 2004, Fritz Pollard of Brown University had been passed over for the Pro Football Hall of Fame more than 40 times. In August 2005, he finally found a home in Canton. Pollard and Robert Wells. That's Bobby Marshall. After Pollard, there was not another black head coach in the NFL for nearly 70 years. The Los Angeles Raiders hired Art Shell as head coach in 1990. Okay, that's Art Shell. He was a player and a coach for the Raiders. 2006 and 1989 to 1994. And he's in the Hall of Fame. Was the second black head football coach after Fritz Pollard. Like 70 years after Fritz Pollard was back in the 20s. Then it was Art Shell as head coach in 1990. In 1926, Pollard and other 9 black players at the time were removed from the NFL. Over the next 7 years, black players here and there would pop up in the league for short periods of time. But by 1933, integration in the NFL was over. Many believe it was because of George Preston Marshall, who entered the NFL in 1932. Marshall openly refused to hire black athletes for his Boston Braves and Washington Redskins team, and he pressured other owners to follow suit. After the NFL was integrated, the Redskins, kind of ironic, Redskins was the last NFL team to sign a black player. Of course, we know that in 1962, Redskins owner, and who was a known racist, George Preston Marshall, finally, he's the same guy who said, I'll draft a black player when the Harlem Globetrotters draft a white player. He got Bobby Mitchell. What was funny is that that's a good picture of Bobby Mitchell and the great Vince Lombardi. Which brings us back to Pennsylvania, is that Ernie Davis, and that's Ernie Davis right there, holding a Heisman Trophy. They made a movie about him too. Was actually, he's from Pennsylvania, was actually drafted by the Redskins, and at the last minute, George Preston Marshall traded him away for Bobby Mitchell. And of course, Ernie Davis never played one down of football because he ended up dying of leukemia. George Preston Marshall. George Taliaferro. He was the first African American drafted by a National Football League team. However, Wallace Triplett was the first one that drafted and played, but this guy was the first African American drafted. in the National Football League. And this guy moved around. He played for, he was drafted by Chicago Bears in the 13th round in the 1949 draft, but chose to play instead with the Los Angeles Dons of the All-America Football Conference. Then he moved to the NFL, where he played with the New York Yanks, teams not even around anymore, 1950 to 1951, Dallas Texans, Baltimore Colts, Philadelphia Eagles. He went to the Pro Bowl in 1951, 52, and 53. That's him. George Taliaferro. Old school. First African American drafted. George Taliaferro. Kenneth S. Kingfish Washington was a professional football player who was the first African American to sign a contract with the National Football League. He signed with the Los Angeles Rams in 1946. All right, Kenny Washington, right here, who played with Jackie Robinson and Willie Strode, right there. They were the first African Americans to play in the NFL. They both played for the Los Angeles Rams in 1946. Of course, Willie Strode went on to be a Hollywood movie star, playing a lot of stuff. Kenny Robinson played football with, all three of them played football with Jackie Robinson for UCLA. Here's another great pioneer African American football player, Woodley Lewis. And this guy played 11 seasons. He was drafted in 1950. He was taken number 8 in the NFL draft, and he played for the Los Angeles Rams, Chicago Cardinals, and Dallas Cowboys. Woodley Lewis. This is Stuart Lee Udall. This is the man who forced George Preston Marshall to integrate the Washington Redskins in 1962. Ernie Davis said when he found out that George Preston Marshall drafted him, he said, I won't play for that SOB, and demanded to be traded. So they traded him to Cleveland for All-Pro running back Bobby Mitchell. And he also was the first African American to win the Heisman Trophy in 1961. Ernie Davis never played a game as a professional, with his only appearance at Cleveland Stadium coming during a 1962 preseason game in which he ran onto the field as a spotlight followed him. Following his death, the Brown retired his number 45 jersey. He signed a 3-year, $200,000 contract with the Browns in late December 1961. Of course, the Redskins drafted him, but he refused to play for Washington because of George Preston Marshall. He was known to be notoriously racist. In the summer of 1962, Davis was diagnosed with acute monoclinic leukemia and began receiving medical treatment. The disease was incurable, and he died in Cleveland Lakeside Hospital May 18, 1963, at the age of 23. They did a movie about Ernie Davis, and it's called The Express. It's a good movie. In March 1963, while in remission, Ernie Davis wrote an article for the Saturday Evening Post in which he said, "Some people say I am unlucky. I don't believe it, and I don't want to sound as if I'm particularly brave or unusual. Sometimes I still get down. Sometimes I feel sorry for myself. Nobody is just one thing all the time. But when I look back, I can't call myself unlucky. My 23rd birthday was December 14th. In these years, I have more than most people get in a lifetime." 2 months later, Ernie Davis died. I like that pic. It's kind of ironic that the Redskins were the last team to draft a black player, I think in like 1962 or 63, and they drafted Bobby Mitchell. But what's even more ironic than that is that in 1987, Doug Williams led the Washington Redskins to a 42-10 Super Bowl win over the Denver Broncos. so he was the first black quarterback to start and win a Super Bowl ever. So George Preston Marshall's probably turned over in his grave now. God don't like ugly.